We're all familiar with Uncle Sam, in either positive or negative connotations. He is often used as shorthand to represent the United States and its government. However, he's not the only character to represent America, but he seems to be the last one standing. So let's get to know some of these other guys. The earliest personification of the United States came before there even was a United States. In the 1730s, it became popular to refer to the 13 colonies as Columbia, in reference to Christopher Columbus. It was part of the Enlightenment's fascination with ancient Rome, because the name Columbia sounded more Latin than America. The usage of this alternate name gave birth to the creation of the goddess Columbia. She initially represented the Americas as a whole, but as time went on, she eventually came to represent just the 13 colonies. As the 18th century progressed, the people living in the 13 colonies began to see themselves as having a unique identity separate from that of Great Britain. As this identity grew, so did the use of Columbia, and like most American symbols, she is used to represent freedom, like in this 1776 poem by Phillis Wheatley. One century scarce performed its destined round, when Gallic powers Columbia's fury found. And so may you who dares disgrace the land of freedom's heaven-defended race. Fixed are the eyes of nations on the scales, for in their hopes Columbia's arm prevails. While Uncle Sam usually represented the US government, Columbia usually represented the people. In the 1840s and 50s, she is depicted as the spirit of the frontier, representing manifest destiny. She is often seen defending or advocating for the rights of oppressed peoples, be it slaves during the Civil War, Chinese migrants during the 1870s, or the Cubans under Spanish rule in the 1890s. Today, the goddess Columbia is seen very little outside of neoclassical art in the United States, and is often confused for, or subsumed into another character, Libertas, the goddess of freedom. Libertas was a Roman goddess who was commonly worshipped by freed slaves in the Roman Empire. Her image has appeared on coinage, buildings, and art around the world, especially since the Enlightenment. Her most famous representation would have to be in the form of the Statue of Liberty. Her story is much the same as that of Columbia, though her association with the United States is not as exclusive. Another precursor to Uncle Sam was Brother Jonathan. His origins date back to the English Civil War, and he represented the New England Puritans who supported the parliamentarians against King Charles I. However, similar to John Bull in England, he was not originally a positive character. The name was used by royalists to refer to hard-nosed, Bible-thumping Puritans, and would later be used by British officers to refer to rebellious colonists during the American Revolution. It was during the Revolution that New Englanders began to appropriate the character of Brother Jonathan as a positive symbol for themselves. Like John Bull, he was an industrious Protestant who worked with his hands and was an early symbol of American capitalism. He was one of numerous symbols used to represent the United States as a whole during the War of 1812. During this time period, his depictions often resembled that of President James Madison. Brother Jonathan was used by foreign powers in the 1880s to represent America. One particular example shows the goddess Britannia speaking to her daughter, Miss Canada, about the aspirations of cousin Jonathan to marry her. This was an expression of Canadian and British fears about the American territorial ambitions toward Canada. Despite his continued use abroad, Brother Jonathan would be subsumed into Uncle Sam by the beginning of the American Civil War. During that time, two short-lived personifications came into being, Johnny Reb and Billy Yank. Johnny Reb represented the southern states, while Billy Yank represented the northern states. They were shown fighting and conversing during the Civil War, most frequently depicted wearing their respective sides' military uniform. There's not much to say about them that the stereotypes of these two regions won't illuminate. These two characters have been seldom seen after the Civil War, mostly being used in depictions of the time period in other mediums. Finally, we get to the man himself, Uncle Sam. The exact origins of Uncle Sam are unclear. His creation is usually dated to the War of 1812, but it may have possibly been earlier. A character named Uncle Sam was mentioned in the original lyrics to Yankee Doodle. Old Uncle Sam came there to change some pancakes and some onions for lasses cakes to carry home to give his wife and young ones. It's not clear whether this Uncle Sam is a reference to the United States as a whole or just some soldier named Sam. The earliest explicit reference to Uncle Sam we are familiar with was in newspapers in 1810. Similar to John Bull, he didn't have a standard appearance at first. At different times he looked very similar to Brother Jonathan, and at other times he was depicted as different historical characters such as Ben Franklin. In 1816, the first literary use of Uncle Sam was published by Frederick Fidfatty as The Adventures of Uncle Sam in Search After His Lost Honor. The book was modeled after John Arbuthnot's Law is a Bottomless Pit, which contained the first literary reference to John Bull. The book was an allegorical history of the lead up to the War of 1812, with Uncle Sam representing the United States. And just like Law is a Bottomless Pit, the depiction of Uncle Sam was not kind. By the end of the American Civil War, Uncle Sam had subsumed much of the appearance and characteristics of Brother Jonathan. But the version of Uncle Sam we are familiar with today came into being in World War I. It would be illustrator and cartoonist James Montgomery Flagg who would create the iconic "I Want You" recruitment poster. When Americans think of Uncle Sam, this is the version that usually pops into their head. In 1989, Congress passed a law declaring Samuel Wilson as being the inspiration for Uncle Sam, and made Samuel Wilson's birthday, September 13th, Uncle Sam's birthday as well, which is a national holiday. There is a statue commemorating both Uncle Sam and Samuel Wilson in Arlington, Massachusetts. National personifications such as John Bull and Uncle Sam used to be very popular, but since the World Wars, cartoonists preferred to attack the political leaders of countries directly rather than using the intermediary of fictional characters. And because of this, these characters are going extinct. So before these characters completely disappear, let's acknowledge them one last time.